Hello, welcome to Craft a Little. Before I get started on today's subject, I just want to apologise for the fact that I've not released anything for almost 2 weeks. Life has been manic, and I know you can all understand that. This is a video that I've been wanting to do for a couple of weeks now, because I think it's really important to talk about creativity and people who inspire us. And the first person I'd like to talk to, not just because she's trending at the moment, but because she was instrumental in my childhood, and that's Kate Bush. Kate Bush is just a creative genius, but she has been plagued by rumour and supposition and has been treated really unfairly over the past 4 decades. So before I get into that, please look below the screen. There's a little thumb that needs your attention. That thumb wants to be coloured in. So give it a little click and colour it in for me. And while you're there, just move slightly over to the right and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And then a little bit further over, there's a bell. There's a little bell that needs colouring in. Hit that bell for notifications of other videos. Thank you. So, in my household, music was a really big thing. My dad was a big music fan. My mum had different tastes to my dad, but there was some crossover. But with Dad, whenever we were doing DIY or we were in the car, or there was a barbecue or some gathering or something, music went on. And with Dad, it was Queen, it was Genesis, and it was Kate Bush. And I'm pretty sure my dad had a little crush on Kate Bush. But he also adored her music. He loved her creativity and the softer and wilder side of her music. Absolutely adored her in every way possible. Kate Bush was really young when she came out with her first album. She was 19. She was still a baby, but a creative genius of a woman. She shot to fame with it, absolutely shot to fame with it, because it was something new and interesting. She was a trailblazer. She had been writing songs since she was, I think, 13. That's the first one that I can find, which is The Man with the Child in His Eyes, which again is a beautiful, powerful song that I adore. But she had always been tinkering around with music. She came from a creative family, really. Her mum was a former folk dancer. Both of her brothers are creative musically and otherwise, and it was just the right environment for her to concentrate on her craft. That's the best way to describe it. And she had the freedom to do that, and the parents that were quite happy to encourage her and her brothers to do what they were passionate about. She did a tour after her first album, which was pretty heavy, as in it was hard work. She had an amazing work ethic that pushed her to put everything she is into that performance. If you're a fan of Lady Gaga or Beyonce or Pink or any number of other female artists and their shows, the absolute quality, the high performance that they give, you have Kate Bush to thank for that, because she really did innovate and design that as a way of performing. Her shows were performance art. There's no two ways about that, with costume changes, and she'd go from ballet with Wuthering Heights to prowling around the stage like a lion in a unitard. It was a real performance art rather than just getting up on stage and singing, which in itself isn't a just. I will say that. But it was grueling. It was a really hard tour. There were press junkets and everything else. And that had to have been really draining, to go from making music and creativity on her terms to then having all of that publicity and it being on other people's terms. And anyone who's creative will know it's really difficult to hand that over to someone else. So after that, she took a break. She was still creating music, but she was doing it for her again. And she never went back to touring. And I can't say I blame her. If she's the kind of person who puts everything she is into her performance, that must be exhausting. Excuse me. Not to mention the fact that we're talking about the end of the 70s and into the early 80s, where she was treated like a piece of meat. She was a commodity. She had to be sexy. She had to be almost dangerous, because that was the brand, that was the appeal. And that comes with a huge amount of pressure and a lot of mental exhaustion of putting up with what was seen as acceptable at the time and never was. Never was, still isn't. And we still see that in the music industry today. So she wasn't being adored for her creativity. She was being adored for her body. And in fact, one of the more recent news articles that I pulled up researching for this described her as part banshee, part vixen. Now, neither of those descriptors are good. A banshee wails out as a sign of impending death. It's not Kate Bush. And vixen makes it sound like she's going to come after your significant other. And it's not fair. She should be talked about in terms of creative genius, of skill and talent and art. And this idea that she is a thing to talk about in those terms is just, it's not on. She has released so many albums over the years without having to go on tour, without having to do the press junket. And she is still popular. She is still celebrated, and in fact received an award earlier on this year as part of her lifetime of achievements, her lifetime of success, without having to do those things. And she's done that before the electronic age, where we can do press online and we can advertise online. She did that in the 80s and 90s when no one else was doing it. And she still sold albums. She sold something like 465 million albums. Sorry, my brain had a total fart there. I'm so sorry. And she's done that without having to bow down to the stereotypical way of doing things. And she's done that and influenced generations of musicians and artists and singers along the way. And people write about her as if there's something wrong with that. Every article I have found has had assumptions about her mental health, has had assumptions about who she is as a person. And that really disturbs me. You know, she's described as a recluse. She likes her privacy. She likes a normal life outside of creating music. She has a spouse, she has a son that she wants to keep as a private thing. And claiming that she's a recluse is unfair. I know plenty of people that don't go out of the house every day And this idea that, you know, many of the articles say she's not been seen publicly. Well, what that really means is she's not been on hand every time the press want her. That has nothing to do with the fact that she's not left the house or gone shopping or gone for a walk. Apparently, she's very, very social with friends, but she's a private person. Why should she or anyone be at the press's beck and call? And this idea of calling her a recluse because she doesn't want that part of the life is unfair. She's been described as eccentric. She was brought up in a very bohemian household. Do you know what? I think if you walked into my house, you'd say the same things. That there was one article that I read that said that there was an air of bohemian chaos. Pretty sure that's my house too. You know, the phrasing of it makes it sound like there is something wrong with how she chooses to live her life. And that kind of reporting puts a huge amount of pressure on a person. And it is highly unfair. So I think we need to change this narrative. You know, that she likes her garden, and she put a bag of bone meal, which is used to fertilize gardens, on her piano and started writing songs, and then left it there while she finished the album. That isn't strange behaviour. That in the article, it's claimed as odd. And it's the same with, she did a BBC Radio 6, I think, article where she was asked about that odd behaviour. I don't think that's odd. I put stuff down and leave it there all of the time. Why is it normal for your average Joe to do that and not okay for someone that you see as famous, who should be publicly available and live this idyllic life according to the media? So, you know, I don't think there's anything odd with that. And I don't think we can, you know, the press or anyone else should be diagnosing mental health issues from that. Because if you type in to a search engine, Kate Bush mental health, there's a huge amount of supposition out there. At no point could I find anywhere that she had publicly or privately claimed to have been diagnosed with anything, or, you know, shared with anyone. I don't think that there's a mental health issue there that is over and above what all of us go through, especially when you're creative and the muse strikes. I don't think there is anything odd about how Miss Bush leads her life. Now, I don't know her. I've never asked these questions. I've never spoken to her. But as an observer and a fan, I cannot find anywhere this being odd behaviour to a point where it needs to be discussed in the media. She went through a delayed grief process from the end of the 80s. She went through a period of every 2 years, she lost someone very dear to her, including her mum. And she didn't have the time, didn't know how to process that grief, because the first passing happened as she was releasing her album, and there was too much to do, and she was busy writing and everything else, and it got to a point where she couldn't hold it in anymore. She went through a delayed grief process, and I'm pretty sure there are plenty of us out there who can identify with that. When my great uncle died, it took me 3 years to accept he was gone. So, and at that point, the floodgates opened, and that's what happened with her. She went through a delayed grief process, and she had to get that out of her system before she started being creative again. And I can identify with that. I lost both of my parents last year, and I didn't know how to be creative through that. Once I found that creativity, that's what helped me through. And I don't know where I would have been without that. But grief isn't this convenient, linear experience that we all go through the same. This idea that from the press, when talking about that, is that she didn't grieve right. There is no right or wrong way. There's no set period of time. You don't get 3 months and that's it. Sometimes it takes years or decades for that grief to hit. And sometimes it hits home straight away. But that is not anyone else's process but yours. That is not anyone else's business but yours. There are also articles talking about her weight. This is a lady who is now in her 60s. She's 63. And she's not going to look like she did when she was 19. And nor should she. She shouldn't have to. Her body is her business. Let's concentrate. Let's take the vixen out of the situation and look at her for who she is, this creative genius that has inspired generations, who is now being recognized by yet another generation for her work being showcased in Stranger Things. Her iconic song, Running Up That Hill, which she actually wanted to call Deal with God, and did call and still refers to it that way. It is being recognized as this iconic work from the late 70s and early 80s. And those are the terms we should be talking about her in. That's the terms we should be talking to anyone, actors, singers, songwriters, musicians, artists, doesn't matter. We should be talking about them in the terms of what is in the public domain, their work. We shouldn't be diagnosing them or claiming that they're reclusive or anything else like that when they just enjoy being normal when they're at home and they enjoy the creative process for themselves. Leave them alone. And while we're talking about diagnosing, the amount of articles that I have found where supposed friends who don't give their names, or her current and former peers was the other one that I found, again, no names, that claim that she's OCD. Now, firstly, no one is their illness. You wouldn't say that. My Aunt Joan is arthritis. People have a condition, but that is not who they are. And there is a difference between OCD and perfectionism and professional pride and wanting how that piece feels inside you to be right when it's outside you. So, I want to know who these people are. Do they have the authority to talk? Do they actually have an insider view? Because friends who are willing to be named are quite happy to say that they go over there and she, her love language is cups of tea and food and, she's very welcoming. But she has to want you in her life. No one else is owed anything, and we need to leave her alone. I would absolutely urge you to go and find her back catalogue. Go to Spotify, go to YouTube, go to Apple Music, have a look at some of her other stuff. Don't just concentrate on Running Up That Hill. Look at Wuthering Heights or some of her slightly unusual work, Army Dreamers or Babushka, and see the range that this amazing woman has. Go and look at her albums, get streaming them. buy them, download them, and have a real deep dive into her creativity, because it will take you somewhere else, just the same as it does for me. This music, it takes me back to good times with my dad. It takes me to this place where I get goosebumps. I have goosebumps just talking about her music. But recognize, I really would urge people to recognize her other work, not just what's been showcased on Stranger Things. So do look her up. If you were interested, I am quite happy to do, because I love talking about my creative muses, the people that really inspire me. So if you want me to, I can do some more of these of other artists that I really love, whether that's music or art or whatever else. But if you've liked this video, please make sure you've liked the actual video. Hit subscribe if you haven't. Hit the bell notifications if you haven't. Colour those buttons in. Also, I would like to say thank you. I'm now up to 14 subscribers, which is wonderful to me. If I could get to 15, I would be really happy. I'd also recommend going to It's Kim. It's a channel by a lady called Kim. She has done a really nice kind of fan obsession, I guess, look into Kate Bush. Her video is brilliant. But I will try and put the link in the description. But please do leave a comment, leave a suggestion. If there's anyone else that you find inspiring that you would like me to put a video up on, then do leave me a comment in the comment section. The reason I ask for likes, subscribes, and comments is, as much as I really love those numbers going up, because I do, it's about the algorithm. The more people that like something, the more people get shown it. So it's not just about my ego. Thank you very much for your time. This has been Craftalytical, and I am Andy. I'll speak to you soon.